Hi, Gavin. Thanks for coming to our Chatterbox podcast. CEO of Stora, owner of Store Stuff in Northern Ireland. We got that right?
Yes, you have. Yeah, yeah.
Good. Yeah, thanks for coming. We met first at the CSTA, I think.
That's right.
That's a couple of years ago in London.
2 summers ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was listening to you, and at first people were talking. It's like what they're talking about and stuff. But the more you went on, I was like, "Oh, that sounds pretty good." And I think we reached out after that and we started speaking from there. So, how's Stora going at the moment? Store Stuff?
Good. Yeah, all good. Thanks. Actually, that CSTA event, I'm glad I actually made some sense because the night before I'd gone out for like a late. My flight had been delayed by 6 hours that day. Went out for a late dinner with a colleague and got sucked into like a 2 a.m. finish. So I wasn't entirely sure it made any sense that day. So, but no, all's going well. Stora we've had a really good year or two with Stora. About 120 customers now all around the world. About 100 of those are in the UK. So probably about another 10 or 15 around Europe. And then we've started to make a bit of progress in the US. The US is a huge market with about 60,000 operators versus 2,000 or 3,000 in the UK. So that's a market we're interested in, but we're not really kind of going for it yet. We're mostly focused in the UK. We've got tons of container operators now on board, especially through Cleveland and the Box Plus program, which has been great. Interestingly, 2 years ago, most of our customers were small startups. Now we've got to the point we recently brought on board a 7-site operator, containers, with a couple of thousand customers. Really starting to move to the larger parts of the industry, which is where we want to go over the long term. So that's great.
No, that sounds really good. Do you know what your split is in the UK between indoor and container at the moment?
I don't know exactly, but I'll guess it's probably about 50-50.
All right.
It might be a little bit more even containers, maybe 60-40 potentially.
Yeah. We've seen the split recently. We've seen a few more of the indoor stores move into outdoor, putting containers in car parks and just optimizing all that space to unlock storage for small businesses. People who want to drive up in a van and stuff who don't want to maybe carry things inside upstairs, etc. So I think container storage seems to be expanding in the UK massively.
Yeah, I think that's probably the reason we have so many is because if you're an indoor container operator, we might speak to them a year before they open because things take a lot longer often to get up and running. So that's why probably there's more of a lag with those sort of customers. Whereas if you're getting into container storage, it can be a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we'll talk to somebody and they're opening in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
So they're a customer very quickly. If I go back to whenever I decided to get into self-storage, the reason I found out about it really was my uncle. Well, he had a hardware shop in my town, just on the outskirts of the town, and he decided, he had a few containers. He thought, I'll rent these out. So he had 2 or 3 or 4 containers. I don't think he even knew it was self-storage. And then he just ended up getting more and more. And like he had 50 or so a few years ago. And he used to say to me, Gavin, this is such a nice business. People turn up here, think they'll be here for a month. And 3 years later, they're still paying me 140 quid a month. And I don't do anything. It's great. So, the container business and the indoor business and some really interesting parts of both as a business. If you want to get into self-storage, they're both very attractive. Containers are attractive because you've got a bit of land, you can open up, you can just buy 5 containers and try it out. You don't have to invest hundreds of thousands or millions up front. Whereas indoor storage, you normally have to invest quite a lot more. That can be attractive too, because if you're prepared to do that, it's probably harder for other people to do it. So if you open up a container park, one of the challenges is that other people can also do the same.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy for them to get into it as well. And I don't think that's really a problem in the UK yet because there's so much unmet demand for self-storage.
Mm-hmm.
But with indoor storage, it does take a lot more money generally.
Yeah.
It's harder for people to compete.
Yeah. So you've been there, you've kind of done it with your self-store site, and obviously been in the industry a long time and stuff. So I think it'd be good to talk through maybe everything that goes into starting a self-storage business and just pick your brains a bit and give us some of your input and stuff. So I think where people normally start is the budget. What's going to be needed to sort of get up and running? What's important to invest in at the start? What could maybe wait? Just from a budget point of view.
Well, so I'll maybe just talk about my own experience briefly. So it was 4 years ago whenever I opened up my first site, and probably 4.5 years ago when I was really starting to get on with it. So I had to look at my budget, and at the time my budget was about £100,000. I looked at containers and stuff, and ultimately decided to do an indoor storage facility. So I kept my budget low by taking out a lease rather than buying a warehouse. But stuff then that I think would apply no matter what sort of self-storage you're getting into. If it's a container site or an indoor site, don't go and build 100, 200, 500 units up front. Well, you could if you really want to. If you want to get on with it, it will be cheaper in the long run to do a lot of that stuff in one big go. But if you are budget constrained, then just do a bit. Buy 5 containers, buy 1 container, by 20. Start small.
Yeah.
If you're doing indoor, I did 49 units in my first phase,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really scared. I was like, will anyone actually move in here? And I thought this might take me 5 years to fill these units. It didn't, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
It was all about sort of minimizing the upfront risk. So anything that you can do to minimize upfront risk, so lower your initial number of units to kind of lower the outlay, prove the model. Whenever I was opening, I didn't want to go and spend tons and tons of money on building a really professional website. I just wanted something that was functional initially, because all of that can come later when you've proven there's a business.
Yeah.
You've proven that you can actually build it so that the business works. So I would find a way to minimize any upfront costs around those sort of things, which is ultimately why I built Stora.
Mm-hmm.
Stora exists to help operators do that and have everything in one go. But even if you're not using Stora, find a way to minimize those sort of upfront costs. You could go and spend 10 grand at a branding agency to go and build logos and all that sort of stuff. If you're talking about a self-storage facility with 10 containers, like that would be a massive waste of money and time. So, don't do those sort of things. It applies to any business. If you're starting a new business, test as much as you can before you invest a lot. Other things, I suppose, I did spend quite a bit on signage up front. So I spent, I think, 4 or 5 grand on my signage out the front of my facility, but I thought that was, that's not even that much really, but I just thought I need to have big signs because I had a really good road frontage, and I thought I want to give myself the best chance of proving this business works. So I want to be seen. So I did that. Yeah, I just would apply that to anything. I suppose there's lots of stuff around opening a container site I haven't personally done before.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess there's lots of groundworks you can do and things like that. So that's not an area I know a whole lot about, but finding ways to minimize that stuff, I think, is important.
Yeah, what you said there is what we tell people, or I tell people if they're looking to start up. You don't have to start with 100 boxes. Yeah. You could start with just 10 boxes. Get a nice row lined up. Get someone in to do a bit of photography. You get some of the basic stuff done. That makes you look bigger than you are. Because if you just position a camera and it's just right, you'll make like you've got a massive row of containers, but really you've got 10 containers. And then, like you say, the signage as well.
Yeah.
Just make yourself visible from the roadside. It's just self-storage these days. Everyone needs it. Like, people are moving into smaller new builds and without a garage. There's no loft lined out. Yeah. But people don't want to throw anything away, so they need some self-storage. I think, like you said about the brand and stuff, like it's incredible how basic self-storage branding can be. Because it's normally just the name of where you are with self-storage at the end and just an icon of a container, and that's all it needs to be. Like, it's not about building a powerhouse brand and stuff. It's more about a local, convenient, easy service. Yeah, and I think you're onto a winner there. Are there any tools out there that people can access to gauge what they need to invest in self-storage?
Well, funny you should ask that, Lewis. We've a really simple tool on our website at Stora, and it's I think it's a little slider where you can kind of say how much money you've got, and then what the returns might be if you go for a container site versus an indoor site. I've built a couple of financial models using spreadsheets. If you want to get into that, they're free to download as well on there. There's a lot of assumptions in those. You have to make assumptions with a model. It's probably worth getting the model, playing around with the real numbers. It's a relatively straightforward business too, so it's not that hard to build a model of your own if you want to model things out.
I agree.
And what's the cost of a container? I'm sure it changes all the time, but if a container is, let's say, £2,400, and you're going to rent it out for £100 a month, it doesn't take a mathematician to know that's a 2-year payback. If you can get it filled, you just factor in the land, other fixed costs, other variable costs. The thing I always am most interested in when I'm talking to anybody is like, how do they plan to run the business? Like, what's the operating model for the business? Because that's the key component, I think, to how the financial model will work and ultimately how well the business will do. So, for example, if you have space for 50 containers and you're thinking, I need to go and employ somebody to sit on this site full time from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Saturday. So actually that's going to be 1.5 to 2 people because it's 6 days, and I want the customers to come in and meet with us and sit down and have a coffee, and I'm going to show them around, and I've got 50 containers. Like 50 containers, let's say that business could turn over, let's just say $7,000 a month if it's at a high occupancy. $7,000 a month. Like, if you think about the model, the operating model, like, can you afford to pay those people to sit there and, I don't know, spend 3,000 of that £7,000 a month paying for people to sit on site? So one of the key questions often for me is like, what size can this business be? What size do you want it to be? And what's your plan for how to run it operationally? Because if you've got 500 containers, of course, it maybe is worth having somebody on site because, let's say the cost of them is £40,000 or £50,000 a year. will having that person on site, will you make more than £50,000 a year of sales as a result? Like, will you make an extra 100 grand?
Mm-hmm.
I think ultimately that's always the question for me is, because you can run a self-storage business, a self-storage facility without staff at the facility all the time, even if it's just yourself, you do have to keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
Somebody probably has to answer the phone. You have to chase anybody that hasn't paid. You have to evict some people the odd time. So it's not that the business itself is manless, but your facilities can certainly be operated remotely.
Yeah,
so I always like to dig into the plan there, because there's no point in opening up 50 containers and having a plan to employ somebody. Like my uncle's 50 containers, he was running the hardware shop anyway. If you have a farm, or if you have a farm shop and you want to open containers, maybe you're there anyway. So maybe it's fine to do it, and that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, makes sense.
But there's always that's always a really interesting thing, I think, to dig into.
What we're talking to people now is, and you touched on it there, is planning for the growth at the very start, and thinking about where you're going to be in X amount of years right from the start. So part of Box Plus is where we can design someone's site. Say you got an acre, and I can get this many containers down, right? But if you do a site survey, you can find out where all your services are and stuff, so you don't put containers down on services and stuff. And then it allows you also to double stack containers on the bottom floor.
Yeah.
And then topper units now are getting really popular. It's basically a 20-foot container with the middle bit cut out, and then you make two like sort of 8-foot stores either side on top. So you walk through the middle of the container. So there's the walkway
on top of the containers below. Okay, interesting.
So you plan for that, and then you say, okay, I'm going to start with X amount on the bottom row, but then I can go on top and stuff. So we're trying to encourage people to think more 3-5 years down the line.
Yeah.
What it could be, rather than just your first 10 containers. So it's all about how you set up your site to start with.
And do most of your customers, do they buy the land or own the land, or do you ever come across people who are renting land for container business as much? Or
I would say most of the people own the land.
Yeah.
I can't recall any people who lease the land or rent the land and stuff. Yeah. We've seen a bit of a shift recently of people who are in the property market because of recent increases in material costs, labour costs. It's maybe not been viable to develop that land for a building. Yeah. So they thought, actually, let's just throw some self-storage down.
It's another way, if you want to get into self-storage, one way to really, like, if you've maybe got a budget of, I don't know, £30,000 or £20,000, and, so then you're thinking, okay, containers only. If you don't own land, renting land is potentially an option. So it's just a way to get in with even less money. And I did consider that early on. And then, so I was talking to somebody about, so what would happen if you did lease land and after 3 years you get kicked out? Yeah. And I've always assumed that would be a nightmare scenario because you have to go and move all the containers. But I was chatting to somebody, and I can't remember who it was now, who had done that. And he was saying, we rented land. We had to move everybody. And actually it was completely fine. Maybe cost like 10 grand, moving, like it took a few days. We moved all the containers, and actually, there's no problem. Nobody moved out. So anyway, I just, that was something I thought was fascinating, because that lowers the barrier to entry even more for some people. If you've 30, 40, 50,000 pounds of cash you want to invest and you want to dip your feet in self-storage, that is another way to potentially do it.
Yeah. If you go into container storage, you don't have to buy the containers.
Well,
we hire them to a lot of self-storers, and they could hire a 20-foot off us now for what, £14-15 a week, and then hire it out at 30. You pay the delivery and collection up front, so the container's just on your land or wherever it is. You're just renting it out to someone, taking that bit of margin, then you can, the container, it could be taken away as soon as it's empty by us and stuff. So again, that's just even lower risk, is just renting the containers off us and sticking them on. So there's just so many different options out there just to get into it and stuff. So
yeah.
So another key thing you've touched on again is when you mentioned throwing up some signage and stuff, and it's about the location. It's you want to be in a good location. You want the footfall, you want the traffic driving by. Have you found anything or spoke to anything out there to help you basically pick that perfect location? Or is there anything out there you think to help me gauge demand in areas, or is there anything you come across?
There is actually a tool online, just a free tool that you can, I think it's a global thing, and presumably they use census data. And you can put in a postcode or a town or anything anywhere in the world, and you can increase the radius. It kind of gives you an idea of how many people live in that radius. So there's something that could potentially be useful. The thing about that is, though, if you live in London, you might be a mile away from somewhere it actually might take you half an hour to get there. So you probably what you want is, what's the population within a 5-10 minute drive? What's the best location? I don't know. Next to McDonald's, maybe somewhere in the city centre next door. But you're going to pay an awful lot for that. So if you have a great location, you're going to have more demand, which means you probably get more bookings, which means you can probably have a higher price. Great, but it doesn't mean you have a good business. So you can't just pay whatever you want for the best site. You have to balance it. My first site is a pretty good, it's a decent location. It's on a business centre opposite a petrol station, so I have a massive sign on the wall. So a lot of people would see the sign, but it's not ideal. My second location is actually 2 miles outside of town in a rural setting. That place has taken longer to fill, but then the population is also smaller in that town, and it's filled more slowly. But at the same time, I got a good price, and the business is profitable and doing okay. So it's all it's hard to tell sometimes. What to go for.
Have you ever done any benchmarking on any of your competitors? Look at sort of cold calling them, see what their occupancy rate is at the moment. If you think about getting into it, maybe just do a Google search of who's nearby, give them a call, and just pretend you're looking at the set. Or is there a waiting list? Well, if the majority of the sites have got a waiting list, there must be high demand in the area. Or if the majority of the sites are half empty and stuff, probably demand is probably catered for. So
you're absolutely right. Before I opened up either of my sites, I did exactly that. So I called around all the local. I made a list of all the businesses nearby that did storage. I called them all to see how busy they were. I think all of them were full, or maybe there's one had a place in a week or two I could move into. And I think that's a really important step. I wouldn't open anywhere without doing that to see how full it. If you ring up a bunch of places and they've all got they're empty, don't start a new place. Population radius. And a competitive search about how people are doing. I think those are at least the two things you should definitely do. Yeah,
your store stuff's both sites are indoor.
Yes.
What would you say are the benefits and drawbacks on that and stuff? And have you maybe thought of going into container storage with demand increasing?
Yeah. Well, my first site, I have no outdoor space, so I don't have the option of containers. The second site, we have got outdoor space. So our plan is there once we get that filled up, or get kind of closer to sort of full occupancy, then we were going to start to put some containers outside, because I've been in plenty of Stora customers who have indoor and then containers. Because if you've got a big car park, why not put down 80 containers? I mean, we were actually looking for store stuff. We were looking at buying a couple of big sites in Northern Ireland. This was a year and a half ago, and they came with huge car parks. We were thinking, okay, container yard out here. Why would you not do that?
So you would say it's relatively easy then for you're indoor, but you think about going outdoor. If you've got the land,
that's a no-brainer.
It's just there's nothing hard about it, is it? It's just putting some containers down and just add it to the site as an option to book.
Yeah, exactly. Then you might have to think a little bit differently about access. If customers are accessing your indoor facility, and in my case, I've got the Noki lock, so they're accessing it and letting themselves in. Whereas if I put containers outside, I'll have to think through a bit more. How do they get access? Because they get access to gates. They'll open up the gates with the Noki app, but the containers won't have Noki on them. So I need to think that through. But that's been solved. I think one of the pros of indoor are, I think, you can charge more per square foot. So like I'm charging with £20 to £23 a square foot at my facilities, whereas there's a container place nearby and they charge £10 a square foot. If you're running an indoor facility, adding containers in, buying them or leasing them or whatever it is, like, why would you not if you have space? Absolutely, 100%.
That's what we're seeing. A few of us do that. We had Safe Store. Took their first few containers off us, and it was a bit of a tight delivery down the back of one of their sites and stuff. But they've put a row of containers down. I think speaking to Stephen, it was to more cater towards the small business. So people in the van want to drive up and on a morning get some stock out or put some away and stuff. Get the tools out, because people don't want to store tools in vans anymore because of thieves and stuff. But they just stick them in a container overnight and drive up to it and get on the next morning. So store stuff's been going 4 years.
4 years.
4 years. What are some of the challenges that you faced with getting people into your site, and then what are some of the wins you've had?
COVID just seemed to, with all the furlough money, whatever it was, and people, I suppose, not being able to go on holidays and maybe renovating their houses, just demand for self-storage. I mean, we see this across the whole UK industry, just went through the roof. So I heard about divorce rates going up because everyone was stuck in the house together.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I've heard divorce rates are a good driver of self-storage. So I ordered my second phase because I thought, well, divorce rate's going to go up here as well.
Yeah.
I was able to kind of get the thing filled. So that helped. This kind of one-off demand shock helped me and probably helped others. The main challenge, to be honest, I faced with that business was there was a phase when I was trying to grow that business quite quickly, and finding sites. That was the biggest challenge. I mean, if I was able to find investors and people who are prepared to back what I was trying to do, but even with investors on board, it's just like, okay, let's go and find sites, trying to find warehouses that we could buy, or even lease. Trying to find other sites. It was just so expensive. So that was probably the biggest challenge. And now, now that the demand shock has come down, I had a lot of move outs earlier this year, like sort of probably 3 or 4 months of just constant move outs. And I think that was a lot of maybe the COVID move ins kind of disappearing. Like another challenge I had at the start was, April 2019, and I was making a decision to get into self-storage, and I wanted to have a website. I wanted to be able to take online bookings and payments, and I didn't want to be chasing people's payments. So, I one day I googled Shopify for self-storage, because Shopify does this for if you want to sell glasses or anything online, you can have a Shopify site set up within an hour. So I googled that thinking, I'll find something like this, and by the end of today I'll have a website and everything. But there was nothing like that for self-storage. So that was a challenge I had, and that's ultimately why I built Stora, because I wanted anybody wanting to get into self-storage should be able to instantly have a website, instantly have online bookings and payments, have something that automates all the invoicing and billing, and have a system to manage the business. So I built that, but that was a challenge because it didn't exist 4.5 years ago. So I had to go and build a lot of that stuff myself. So that was a significant challenge, although luckily I had a lot of friends who were able to help out and owed me a couple of favors. So I was able to get it done without too much expenditure.
So you started Store stuff about Stora. How were you managing it before then? Was it just spreadsheets and manual? Or? So
I started Store stuff when I opened in September. What I'd done then was I can't write code or do any of this stuff. So a friend built a website. And it's not a million miles away from the Stora website and how it looks today, where my customers could come and click show me prices. They could see the prices, and then if they clicked on it, I used a service called Chargebee, which is a recurring billing solution that would come up, and then the customer would put in their card details, and then in the background that would then set up the recurring billing and payments. So I built my own website. I used Chargebee. I used Stripe for the payments. So I wasn't using spreadsheets, but then Stora came out, we shifted it all across the Stora. We speak to container operators all the time, and lots of them are running their business with spreadsheets or whiteboards. Or I'm meeting with one, going over to see one in a couple of days, and he has just little cards that he uses, and they've like 300 containers in one big site. So it's all just on cards and notes, and this person maybe owes £50, whatever it might be. But we've taken on board lots of those customers, so we've helped them transition from that kind of way of running. A lot of the time, what we'll come across is somebody's kind of almost by accident gone from 5 containers or whatever it is to 500.
Yeah,
because it's just going so well, and it's just become so hard to manage. And maybe they're thinking about opening up a new site, or maybe they're thinking about trying to kind of retire a little bit, whatever it is. A lot of time it's we want to expand, and we need to sort this system out here.
Yeah,
and we'll then help them transition from what they've been doing on to Stora. Yeah. So we come across that a lot. There's lots of people doing that. Luckily, I avoided that because I wouldn't be able to manage spreadsheets with 150 customers. I would lose my mind.
No, so you kind of built Stora. It wasn't called Stora. It had everything now what Stora does.
Yeah.
So then you went away and just built something that is an all-in-one kind of thing. It just makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, I wrote an article about 3 or 4 years ago on LinkedIn, and it was read by lots of people. I basically wrote an article about all these, basically all the systems I sort of stuck together with sellotape. Is the way I'd say it, to make it all work. And I wrote an article about all the stuff I'd used to do that. And it was off the back of that I realized there was demand for something else. Like I had just recently sold some shares in another tech startup. So I was like, I'll get out of tech. I'll just open up self-storage sites. So that'll be hopefully a bit easier. And then I got sucked back into tech because it looked like there was demand for a product, and that's what Stora has become.
Yeah.
So Stora has happened by accident, really, to be honest.
No investments do, don't they? Yeah. But we come across it, and it's amazing how many people just don't realise there's stuff out there that can manage the site for them. But there is. But I don't know. Maybe it's just how people would think. So what would people search for when they were looking for something like Stora? You wouldn't search Stora if you weren't in the industry. You'd search, I don't know, self-storage management software. Or would you even think there was something out there? But
I think a lot of people have kind of almost got into self-storage by accident, and they probably have another business running alongside it. Maybe they're farmers, or they've got car dealerships and all sorts of stuff, and they've got space, so they've done containers around the back. And
we get them all the time. There's just so many of just falling into it because they've got a bit of space or...
Yeah, and probably a lot of them are just using, maybe they already have an existing system for their other business. It's quite a straightforward business, self-storage, but it has its little complications, and it mostly comes down to billing and the fact that people, maybe pay monthly or weekly, whatever it is, and then they want to cancel, and there's a notice period, and maybe there's a refund to happen, and then it comes down to access. How do you let them access the place? If it's limited by when your car garage is open, whatever it is, it can be limiting to how many people can move in. So it does come a point where I think it gets bigger or mature enough where a dedicated system for self-storage makes much more sense.
Then you're back to that thing where you said about if you've got an existing business and you've got existing staff managing it, but it grows and grows and grows, and more of their time is dedicated to just managing a self-store site, you've got to look at what you're paying them to do that between what you're bringing in.
There's a good example of that. And so even people will come across, sometimes people, most people just say, oh yeah, let's say we're going to automate payments. So they, it's like, okay, we will have to pay for that. So for example, if you're doing direct debits, let's say you're taking direct debits using our system, I think the fee for a direct debit is 1% up to a maximum of £2. So maybe you're talking to a customer who's been running their business for 10 years and they've been doing direct debits direct to the bank and filling out a mandate, writing it down and posting it to the bank, whatever way they do it. And that might cost 30p. So a lot of time be like, well, I don't want to pay £2. I'm already paying 30p, and it just comes down to exactly what you've just said there, where it's like, well, that's okay. If you want to keep filling out a paper form and getting meeting customers, get them to sign it as well, 30p is what you'll pay. And if that's what you want to do, keep doing it. If you want to save all of that time and the hassle and the management of it, then you pay a bit more, but you'll get that back 10 times, because it's not just the fact that you won't need staff to do that anymore. It frees up your staff's time to go and do more important work, like marketing, or go and find ways to sponsor local teams, or go and hand out flyers in town, or find ways to drive demand up, rather than spending time on administrative tasks that don't add any value. And yes, you might pay a little bit more in processing fees, but it's totally worth it. There'll often be a moment we talk about, oh, how full are you? And they'll say, oh no, we're completely full. It's great. A lot of operators will optimize their price, will price their units and their facilities based on trying to optimize occupancy at as full as possible. Really, you should be optimizing. Your price should be set to optimize for the maximum revenue for your facility. And that actually requires optimizing for your rate per square foot and occupancy, the two things at once. So I always try and encourage operators who are full, put your prices up. But that doesn't work for everybody. It's not just everyone put their prices up. But if you're full, let's say you're full and you're getting £10 a square foot, what if you charge £15 a square foot? You might also still be full. If you've never put your price up, you'll never know. Whenever I opened up my first facility, I set my prices at £14 a square foot because I was really nervous. Will anyone actually book? Like, what if this goes wrong? So all my prices were on average £14 a square foot. And then a few months in, I realized, well, it isn't just about bookings. And I was getting bookings, so I thought, right, well, I'll take a risk and I'll put the prices up and up and up. And now it's at about £22 a square foot. And in fact, it's been there for maybe a year about that rate. I've had to bring it down a little bit because of the demand going down. But if I wasn't playing around with prices and testing out what is the right price here, then my sales would be 35% lower. My profit would be half what it is. So it's really important to look at that. I'm not sure why I got onto that topic, by the way, but I can't remember what your question, what your point was. But
I think it's really good. I think a lot of what we found is a lot of container people, they'll fall back into the just the round numbers. 20 quid for a 20-foot week, or 30 quid or 100 quid a month for a 20-foot and stuff. No real thought behind what you've just said.
And that reminds me, this is why I brought it up. Sorry, just to cut in. That's why if you're automating your payment processing, your customer has given you the permission to charge them on a monthly basis for the service you're providing them. And if you've got a Sky subscription or Netflix subscription or Spotify, any of those sort of things, those companies have the same thing from you, and they'll contact you every year and say, oh, our price has gone up from £12 to £14. And you don't have to do anything to make the change. And it's exactly the same in self-storage. So if you've got somebody in at £10 a square foot and you're thinking, okay, I need to test pricing because that's actually far too low. If you're on an automated direct debit, you just inform them, give them 30 days notice and say, okay, your price has gone from £100 to £120. The customer doesn't have to do anything different. And that's the value of automation. So one of the big values about it is that it gives you the control over your pricing strategy. I'm increasingly thinking it's one of the most important aspects of running a self-storage business successfully. The difference between doing it well and doing it badly is getting £10 a square foot versus £20 a square foot, is 50 grand a profit versus 200 grand a profit. And for exactly the same size of site, making your life as easy as you can and not thinking about it as, oh, well, I don't want to have to sack that member of staff who's been here for 10 years. It's not about that. It's about freeing that person up or yourself up to do more stuff, to go and open up a new site, grow the business more, get more containers off, buy more off Cleveland, get more containers, double stack, whatever it is. But, it's just about, you can free up your time and build a better business.
Yeah, definitely. No, all sounds really, really good. Hopefully they'll use it in their own businesses and gives them the spur to start their own. I think that'll do it for part one, Gavin. I think we've spoke about some good stuff there. I think we'll come back in a bit and get into more detail on what actually is Stora and some quick wins and some do's and don'ts that you found over the years. Cool.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Nice one.
Chatterbox was brought to you by Cleveland Containers, the UK's leading supplier of new and used shipping containers and the largest supplier to the container self-storage market. If you're looking to enter the self-storage industry or streamline and expand your current site, talk to us about Box Plus, our one-stop service that can provide you with everything you need to set up and run a simple, remotely operated and profitable self-storage business. For more information, head to clevelandcontainers.co.uk and follow us on social media for more content on all things shipping containers and self-storage.